Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DCSD Parent University webinar, Safe Winter Driving for New Teen Drivers. My name is Stacy Blaylock, and I work in the Communications Department for the Douglas County School District. Now, before we get started, I want to thank our outstanding partners at Sky Ridge Medical Center for their continued support and their interest in partnering with our families in Douglas County. And tonight, we're going to hear from Theo Mink, Executive Director of the South Metro Safety Foundation and former Parker Police Driving Instructor. If you have any questions during his presentation, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If time allows, there may be a chance to ask questions live at the end. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over things to Theo to get us started.
All right, hello everybody. Let me get our screen up, our presentation here really fast. So as Stacy said, my name is Theo Mink. I'm the Executive Director for the South Metro Safety Foundation. South Metro Safety Foundation is the nonprofit partner to South Metro Fire Rescue. We handle a lot of the community-oriented safety training programs such as CPR, driving, and car seat installation. I was formerly a Parker police officer. I was with Parker PD for the better part of 17 years on and off. For 10 of those years, I was the lead driving instructor for the department and also an accident investigator. When I was a fairly new police officer back in the early 2000s, we had a bunch of fatal accidents that involved teenage drivers. Being a new cop, that was kind of difficult to deal with and to go out and respond to. But what was the hardest part, I think, was dealing with the family members, and letting them know what happened with their kids. Those are the things that I still have bad dreams about to this day. You know, and you feel helpless as a new police officer, and you know, I wanted to do what I could to try to help prevent some of that stuff from happening. In about 2005, as I was just getting done with the driving instructor training program, I started working with South Metro, at the time it was Parker Fire, that now became South Metro Fire, to put together our teen crash avoidance program. I've been teaching that since 05, so for about 15 years, and then just this past spring, I had the opportunity to take over as executive director for the foundation, which has been a tremendous opportunity that I've enjoyed. Some of the quick goals for our program: we're going to talk a little bit to new drivers, and this is geared towards new drivers and parents. You know, a little bit of both. The way that the state kind of works with the driving program is parents are kind of responsible for the training of their kids to be safe drivers. That's a big task. So we'll talk through a little bit of what it takes for parents and some things that you need to know, and then also for the new drivers, some things that you need to know as well. One of the difficulties with a program like this is I'm better at teaching this stuff in person, in a vehicle, so that I can give you the experience, so that you can better understand the concepts that we'll talk about. Obviously, that's difficult using this platform, so there are going to be quite a few videos that hopefully we'll get to point across, so that you can at least understand and have the tools that you need to help you be safe. We're going to talk about vehicles, the different types of vehicles. That's one of the main questions that I get from parents, is what is the best type of vehicle for my new driver? What you need to do to get ready for winter, and particularly winter driving. This is something that actually gets overlooked, and it's a big contributor in a lot of the accidents that we deal with, is not necessarily the driving actions, but actually being ready and prepared to drive safely in the winter, or at least with your car. And then some of the driving aspects. At the end of the driving portion, when we talk about some of the concepts and techniques that can help keep you safe, and realistically, they're fairly simple. Again, the best way to learn it is through experience. We'll look at a few videos of crashes, winter driving related crashes, and kind of talk through those a little bit just to see what went wrong, so you can understand at least the dynamics behind those. So, as I mentioned, in the early 2000s, when I first became a police officer, there were numerous teen fatalities. And this was a problem that was really noticed around the late 90s. There was a spike in teen driving related fatalities. So what the state did is revamped the licensing process for new drivers. They came up with the graduated driver's license program, which really came into effect around 2004, 2005-ish. Since this program came into effect, they actually saw a reduction of teenage-related deaths of about 45%. So they went down dramatically after this. So it just kind of says what the GDL laws do is it sets some standards for the permitting phase, which we'll talk about here in a minute, to allow a teen driver to properly learn how to be safe drivers. But then it sets restrictions for the new drivers, which include the number of passengers, distracted driving, so they can't use their cell phone, zero tolerance in alcohol, the time of days that they can be out driving, things like that. Here's just kind of a breakdown of the permitting phase. So 14 and 6 months to 15 and 6 months is when a student can start getting their permit. Now, they can't actually get their permit until they're 15 years old, but they can start going through a 30-hour driver's education course at 14 and 6 months. What that requires you to do is you do the 30 hours, you take the permit test at 15, and then you do around 6 hours of behind the wheel driving lessons with an instructor. They're still required to log 50 hours of drive time with the parents, or a minimum of 50 hours, with 10 of those being at night, before they can get their driver's license at 16. I like this option. I'm kind of the belief that the more experience that you can give a driver, the better that they will be. So if you start them early and you give them as much time with an instructor that is not their parent, or someone close to them, the better they're going to be. Because I mean, let's be honest about that. Your kids probably aren't going to listen to you as well as they're going to listen to somebody else most of the time. That's my experience with being a parent of a new driver, at least. Another option is 15 and 6 months to 16 years. So once if you decide not to start the process at 14 and a half, you can start the process at 15 and a half. And what they need to do for this is to complete a 4-hour driver's awareness program. They can still attend the 30-hour driver education program as well, but the 4-hour program is a little bit cheaper. Obviously, it's not multiple weekends. Typically, it's just one day that they can attend, and then they can go out and get their permit. There isn't any instructor drive time required, but it is optional and highly suggested. That does, for this option, cost extra. What you're looking at for the 4-hour driver's awareness program is going to be anywhere from $80 to $100. For the 30-hour driver's education program, including the 6-hour behind the wheel time, is going to be about $500. If you just do the 6-hour behind the wheel time with an instructor, you're still going to be looking at about $400. So, I mean, to get the whole package, this one's probably the best option. Let's see, and they can go ahead and start to get their permit at 16 without any training required. Again, I don't like this option. The more training that you can give a driver, the safer they're going to be, the better they're going to be. So this one's not my favorite. If they want to wait, that's fine. And that actually is a trend that we're seeing, is that this generation of teenagers wanting to get their license a little bit later than, say, mine. You know, I was out the door the minute I turned 16. Where other kids now are waiting till they're 17 and even 18 before they get their driver's license. Another consideration with this to take when you're looking, if you look for driver's education classes, is the state requirement for driver's ed is fairly uniform. So the offerings of all of the different driver's ed companies in the state are going to be very similar because they have to follow the standard and curriculum that is set by the state. You just want to look into some of the experience of the instructors, and all that's probably where the best differences are going to be. Some of the classes are offered online. The state actually found that although they're allowing it, they found that students are retaining about 10% of the information that's offered in that 30-hour class if it's done online, which is kind of interesting.
So, kids getting a driver's license, huh? Yeah, clear the roads. Haha. Seriously though, it's scary stuff. Your new driver hurtling down the highway, to say nothing of all the new costs you may be facing. Oh boy. But really, look at the statistics. Drivers between the ages of 15 and 19 are much more likely to experience a collision. You don't want that. I don't want that. Heck, the government doesn't want that. And that's why states nationwide have adopted graduated driver licensing regulations. I know, it sounds complicated, but don't worry. I'm here to help. Welcome to Graduated Driver Licensing Made Simple. Now, each state has its own set of specific rules and regulations. But today, we're taking a look at Colorado. Meet Daniel and his mom, Kay. They're about to start on the great adventure of the GDL. Daniel turned 15 yesterday. In Colorado, this means he's just old enough to apply for his driver education permit. To do this, he must
Well, seems like we may have lost the video.
a 4-hour driver's awareness course. If he chose to wait, he would then be applying for a driver awareness permit, or he can wait until he's 16 and receive a minor instruction permit and not have to take any courses. Fortunately, he is enrolled in driver's education, and he and his mom have even spent time together studying this year's Colorado Driver Handbook. All they have to do now is head down to the local DMV, where they'll provide documents of identification and proof of completion of driver's education. Here, Daniel will take a vision screening test and a knowledge exam, and his mom will sign an affidavit of guardianship and liability. 25 harrowing questions later, Daniel is a proud learner's permit recipient. So what now? Now the fun part. Daniel needs to clock 50 hours of supervised driving time with his mom, a driving instructor, or a designated alternate permit supervisor, in case the parent doesn't have a valid driver's license. Kay will need to sign off on an official DMV log of these hours, stating that Daniel has indeed been practicing his lane changes and three-point turns. The supervised driving period is really important because it gives experienced drivers a chance to make sure that their protege is learning excellent safety practices behind the wheel. Now, Daniel can drive with a licensed adult over the age of 21, with his mom's permission, but it will not count towards the 50 hours. Now that he's got his permit, Daniel needs to spend the next 12 months working on his driving abilities under his mom's watchful eye before moving on to the next phase. Meet Amanda and her uncle Jason. Amanda is 16, has completed her driver's training, and just spent the last 12 months learning Jason's best tips and tricks for how to pull off the perfect parallel parking job, among other vital rules of the road. Since she is younger than 16 years and 6 months, she'll need to provide a 6-hour certificate from the driver's education school. Nevertheless, Amanda is now ready to embark on that vital rite of passage, the road test. She and Jason head to the DMV, where Amanda will show off her shiny new driving skills.
All right. So one thing that I like to tell parents about this process, and up until your new driver turns 18, because you've signed that affidavit of liability at the DMV, you essentially own their driving rights. So if something were to happen, let's say they're not listening to you, or they're getting into several minor accidents that haven't necessarily been reported, or they're breaking rules, you can actually go to the DMV and you can revoke their license by pulling that affidavit of liability until they're 18 years old. And the reason for that is because you are liable for their actions. That's why you signed that. So if they were to have a major accident and cause injuries, not only well, they see some repercussions from that, but ultimately you'll be liable for it as well through the state, or excuse me, civilly. But these are some of the restrictions for driver's licenses. You know, we won't go over it too much. This is also going to be available on our website and also the Douglas County Schools website as well, if you have further questions about it. All right, we're going to talk about cars. One of my favorite subjects. I do like cars quite a lot. This is one of those things that we can talk about for a very long time. I'll try not to bore you too much by doing that, though. Some of the questions that we get about vehicles is what's the best choice? Especially being in Colorado, our weather can be, you know, it can shift from one extreme to the other. So it can be 70 degrees one day and then it can be below zero the next in a blizzard. Or as we saw a couple of years ago, a bomb cyclone. I mean, you never know what you're going to get with the weather here. So your vehicle is a pretty important consideration as far as safety is concerned. Rear-wheel drive vehicles, this is kind of the older type platform for a vehicle. Basically, all of the power from the engine goes to the rear tires. It has some advantages to it, including better weight distribution. My preference actually goes to a rear-wheel drive car for me, simply because I was trained to drive that type of vehicle, so I do relatively well with it. It handles better, accelerates better, and actually brakes better in dry surfaces. The disadvantage to it, though, is traction is very poor when it's even just wet outside. Or when it starts to snow and maybe there's a sheet of ice on the road, traction is almost impossible with this type of a platform unless you really are comfortable with how to drive it. They're also a little bit heavier, so you see a decrease in fuel economy. And then oversteer. So oversteer is basically when the rear end starts to swing out or is accelerating faster than the front end, which causes a car to spin out. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but the rear-wheel drive cars have a pretty good likelihood of doing that, especially if you just hit the gas too hard. Front-wheel drive, this is probably one of the more common types of vehicle that you see on the road. Fairly good for beginners. They're forgiving. They're easy to deal with for the most part. They're cheaper, and they have better traction on wet or slippery surfaces. And the reason for that is the drive wheels are up front, so the power is going to those wheels, so they're able to make a little bit more traction with that extra weight pushing down on them. One of the problems that you see with this type of a platform is the rear end has no weight. So if you look at the picture, all the mechanics are up front. There's nothing in the back. There's nothing to help keep that those back tires down and help keep them making traction. So you tend to get a little bit of oversteer on this type of a platform as well, simply because of the lack of weight in the back. One of the other issues you run into is something called understeer, and that's where the front tires stop making traction as you're driving. This happens most commonly when you're going into a turn and you're turning the vehicle and the vehicle just wants to continue going straight. And that's because all of the control responsibilities of this vehicle are handled up front. So the engine is driving the wheels, your steering wheel is turning the wheels, and most of your brake force is actually going to be coming from the front of the wheels as well. From a handling standpoint, their characteristics tend to be a little bit less balanced, and repairs when these things break can be a little bit more complicated just because of how compact everything is up front. Four-wheel drive, which we see quite a bit of in Colorado. You know, you think of the most notable four-wheel drive or 4x4 that you'll see out there is going to be a Jeep. I mean, there's literally thousands of them on the roadway. I can't go a mile without seeing at least 5. And I like Jeeps, but they still aren't the best choice for a new driver. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. But essentially the way that four-wheel drive works is power typically is going to be provided or transferred to the rear tires until four-wheel drive is shifted on, and it's done so manually with the most common four-wheel drive setups. So you have to know that, okay, the road looks kind of slick. I'm going to put it in four-wheel drive, and what that typically will do, it doesn't spin all four wheels, but it might spin, depending on the vehicle that you have, it might spin the driver's side front tire and the passenger side rear tire, so at a diagonal. But it's not, unless you have a specific setup, going to spin all four tires at once. And really, you don't want that to happen, because if all four tires are spinning at once, it makes it very difficult to go around curves. And even with the setup as it is, you'll get a little bit of binding if you go around a curve in four-wheel drive. This type of a platform is really best for hardcore off-road conditions. So dirt trails, things like that are more what this is for. You get good traction when it's snowy and icy outside. Your speed is going to be limited to around 50 to 55 miles per hour because of the transfer case, which is the deal in the middle that essentially makes this a four-wheel drive. And they're heavy. They're a very heavy platform, which weight decreases your fuel economy. Another thing that is not favorable for a new driver with this type of a platform is the size of the vehicles that typically incorporate this type of drivetrain. So you're going to see more of your full-size trucks, again, Jeeps, anything that's got a higher center of gravity and more weight. I've had parents say, well, I'm going to put my kid in the biggest, heaviest vehicle that I can because I think it's going to be safe. And that's not true. Yeah, you have more weight and more energy behind you. If they're in a crash, they might not feel it as much, but their likelihood of getting into a crash is increased because that weight and that height make controlling these things fairly difficult. Once they start to get into a skid and lose control, they have a difficult time regaining control of these. So they're not forgiving. The one that I probably suggest the most is going to be an all-wheel drive car. So think like Subarus. A lot of the Hyundais now, they're smaller crossover SUVs are going to have an all-wheel drive system. What all-wheel drive does is it typically will send power either to the front wheels or to the rear wheels, depending on the setup, and that will be the bias that car has. Once it detects that it's starting to slide, it will send power to the wheels that need it, without the driver having to have any sort of interaction with it. It does it automatically through a center differential. And that center differential is key for an all-wheel drive vehicle. It's what really makes the difference between this and a four-wheel drive vehicle. These are just superior for roads like what we have in Colorado, where you can be driving and it's dry, and then all of a sudden you hit a patch of black ice and start to skid. This is the optimal setup for that. Some of the handling characteristics are better than a front-wheel drive car, but they still have that tendency to understeer, because the front tires are still providing power to the ground under certain circumstances, and they can become overwhelmed and lose traction because of that. These really are suitable for all road conditions, though. I mean, you can go down the road at highway speeds without having to worry about the four-wheel drive system. The only thing that they're not as good at are going to be the extreme off-road conditions, which really none of you should be doing very often. Again, disadvantages, there's more weight associated with this type of vehicle, so you're going to see a reduced fuel economy. They're very complicated to repair when they break, and the initial cost out the door in purchasing one is pretty expensive. They do hold their value, though, from a resale standpoint in this state fairly well too. I mean, if you look at how much a Subaru costs brand new versus a used one, they really don't decrease. Other safety systems that you're going to see with a car that will help with winter driving is going to be ABS, or anti-lock braking. So cars without ABS, so think back to 60s, 70s, and some of the 80s even. When you apply the brakes, you can actually stop the rotation of the tires. it's that rotation of the tires that allows you to have control. It allows you to steer the vehicle. Once those tires stop rotating, you don't have any control over the vehicle, and you're basically just sliding across the road. And because you have inertia, you're going at speed. You stop that rotation of the tires, you're still going to move. The car is still going to move for a distance until eventually friction takes over and it stops. But it takes a long way. So you don't have the ability to steer around objects when those wheels are locked up. Your ABS system helps prevent that from happening. And essentially what it does is it detects when those wheels lock up, and it relieves some of the pressure on the brakes and allows the wheel to rotate, and then it clamps down on the brake, and it does it intermittently. So if you've had any experience with ABS, you apply the brakes and you feel the brake pedal vibrating, that's going to be your ABS system kicking in. Electronic stability control is kind of well, actually, let's go to traction control first. So what traction control does is it detects when your wheels are spinning, like if you're accelerating too hard, and it will reduce the amount of power going to those wheels so that you can regain traction. Electronic stability control takes that a little bit farther, and it will actually start to apply the brakes on individual wheels in order to help you regain control. Both of these systems are very good for driving around curves, and if you lose traction as you're going around the curve, it will help you regain traction. One of the disadvantages, though, is if you're on like a hill and it's very snowy and icy, and you get stopped on that hill and you need to start going, these systems actually won't let you go because it'll detect those wheels spinning as you start to go. It'll cut power, and you can't move. You'll start to slide down the hill if it's steep enough. So typically, you have to take those off in order to get up the hill and spin the wheels a little bit. Lane keeping assist, I don't like this system. This will actually detect if the car is turning without the turn signal being turned on. Some of them will even detect the white lines on the road if you're drifting off of the road. I rented one of these in Texas, was driving on a very flat, straight road, and there were some rocks in the middle of my lane, so I moved over to the right to try to avoid hitting the rocks, and that system took over and pushed me back over into the rocks. I don't like the system that self-controls the car. I like to be in control, and for that reason. Automatic braking or emergency braking is kind of the same thing. It detects when there's an object in front of you, and it applies the brakes to make you stop. I don't like that concept of the car trying to stop for me because I don't trust that it's going to make the right choices. My wife's car has a system that detects objects in front of you, and it'll give you a warning, but it won't apply the brakes. But there's one curve that we live by, that every single time you go around the curve, it sees the sign there, and it thinks that we're going to hit the sign, and it activates the system. It activates the alert. It doesn't apply the brakes, but if that were to have the emergency braking on there, and it were to apply the brakes, we would have a pretty high likelihood of crashing. And I just don't like that system. This is kind of a suggestion of vehicle types. This sort of thing, when you do your research to really look into as far as how the different cars go. Subarus again are kind of the ones that seem to be the most successful out here for new drivers. This has Subaru Impreza on it. The ones that I see team drivers on our driving course that tend to have the most success are going to be the Subaru Forester. For whatever reason, when I drive that car out on our driving pad, I can't make it break loose. I can't make it slide. It's a very, very solid platform. The drivetrain is very similar to the Impreza, but the weight distribution is going to be quite a bit different. I think that's what makes the difference with it, in my experience. Obviously, you want to look at power output with the new driver. We've had kids that had, there were a kid that came out with a Audi S8, basically had a Lamborghini V10 in it. That just wasn't my favorite choice for a new driver, and he drove it like it had a Lamborghini V10 in it. Had a kid with a Corvette. He was there because he got into a crash. The court sent him to our class, and his Corvette was all dinged up, and he couldn't keep control of the thing. He just didn't understand how to drive that properly. and this really will affect insurance rates and everything like that. So my suggestion is, yeah, it's cool. Your kids will probably love you for buying them the coolest car that is around, but you're doing them a disservice if you get them a car like that, in my opinion. Here are a couple of resources. You want to take out your cell phone and take a quick picture of this, but again, this will also be available for you to download as well. But these are some resources for doing your research on cars. TFL Car here, they're a Colorado-based company. They do a lot of reviews on cars and tires, and they are applicable to Colorado. So if you go to YouTube and you actually search TFL Car with whatever model you're looking for, there's a strong likelihood that they're going to have a pretty thorough review of it. Edmunds and Kelly Blue Book also have some pretty good resources to look at. And as far as safety ratings go, NHTSA is going to be kind of the gold standard of where you go look at the safety ratings for a vehicle. They take cars of every single make and model and they crash them, and then they tell you how well they crash and how safe they are. So just a very good resource. One of the things that with driving that gets overlooked is the maintenance of your vehicle. A poorly maintained vehicle in Colorado is really a safety hazard. I've seen numerous accidents just because people fail to properly maintain them and make sure that they're ready for the harsh conditions that we can see, or the ever-changing conditions that we can see. One of the first things that you really want to do is check the owner's manual of the car to see if where you drive is considered severe. Colorado can be, but not all the time. But if you're up in like Montana and Canada, that's where that severe would more than likely come into play. But it'll tell you suggestions during different temperature ranges of oil and all that stuff that you can put in for the season. The consideration is to put a winter weight oil in the vehicle for the season, just to be safe. It's not a bad idea. Keeps your car running a little bit longer, and again, your car is an investment, so you want to make sure that it lasts as long as you possibly can make it. Other systems you want to check is going to be your coolant, and this is one that people look at me kind of weird. Well, it's going to be cold already. Why do I need to check my coolant? And actually, the fluid that you put in there needs to be changed around every 2 years. The chemicals inside of it prevent it from freezing. It also prevents your cooling system and the internals of your engine from corroding, but that can break down. I've actually had a car overheat when it was below freezing. I was driving on the road and everything, it was cold outside. The car overheated because the coolant broke down. It just wasn't doing its job as effectively and had to be flushed out and refilled. You want to check your battery. Cold weather has a pretty tremendous effect on your battery. It will cause it to lose charge or not to be as powerful. Your batteries actually have an expiration date on it or an installation date and suggested change out date. So you want to look at that on the battery. It's usually on a tag that's stamped on there. Take a look at that, and if it looks like your battery is getting out of date, something that you want to consider changing out. Batteries are expensive, but they're important. You need to have that in the car. Your heater and your defroster. You look over to the picture to the right, and you don't want to be stuck in something like this without having a good defroster, because that's going to take forever to scrape yourself out of. But if you can warm up the car and the inside of the car, it's going to help melt your windows. And it's going to keep you safe when you're going down the road. It's going to prevent your windows from fogging up and any other frost or ice from developing on the windshield as you're driving, obstructing your view. Wipers and fluid. Again, that's one of those things that kind of gets overlooked. I like to try to change my wipers out every year. The rubber on the wipers breaks down and it becomes less effective at clearing my windshield. You can really tell when it's time to change those wipers out when your windshield is streaking, when it's either raining or when you spray it with the windshield wiper fluid. That's time to get things changed out so that you can. That's one of the most important things that you need to be able to do inside of the vehicle is you need to be able to see. Windshield washer fluid also is extremely important to put in there. Don't use water unless it's summertime, so people will do that to save some money. Stick with the store brand stuff. It's specific to winter typically, and won't freeze. And you can actually get some that have de-icer kind of mixed into it, so you can spray it on this particular windshield here. If it would spray, probably not in this one, but if you have ice on your windshield, it'll spray and de-ice it. Headlights and your fog lights. Obviously, you want to be able to see, especially at night. Change those out. State of Colorado says that you can have 4 lights on in the front at any given time. So you see those people that have their fog lights, their headlight, and then they have that obnoxious LED light bar. That's actually that's illegal. It blinds other drivers. But you can have your factory fog lights and your headlights on it at the same time. But make sure they're working, make sure they're adjusted. A lot of that information is in the user manual, and it'll help you be safer at night, especially in the wintertime or when it's blizzard-like conditions where your visibility is minimized. The fog lights will help with that. Your fuel tank. This again is one of those things that people just don't do. You like to drive your car and not like to put fuel in it because it costs money. That's me too. But in the wintertime, when it's going to dip below freezing, condensation will actually develop in your fuel lines. And if your fuel tank is below or around 1/4 of a tank, there's a strong possibility that condensation will freeze and it will clog your fuel line. So if you keep your fuel tank above 1/4 of the tank, and really the recommended levels from some of the experts that I talked to is actually more like 1/2 a tank. But make sure you keep fuel in your car, especially if it's going to be parked outside in the cold weather. An emergency kit's pretty important to have. This is something that if you think back to the bomb cyclone we had back a couple of years ago, people who had this and were stranded, it saved their lives. It's something that takes up room. It's something that takes up consideration. You have to look at it every so often to make sure things are still clean and good in it. But it's a good thing to have, especially if you drive a lot. If you don't do this, I would say the #1 most important thing though that you need to make sure you have is an ice scraper. Back when I was in high school, I had this old Jeep, and the windshield froze up on it. It was parked overnight, and I didn't have an ice scraper. I was running late for school. So I took an old CD and I broke it in half and tried to use that. It doesn't work. Get a real one. They work better. Windshield de-icer. Again, it's a nice thing to have, especially if you can get the washer fluid that has that built into it. Flashlight. A whisk broom so that you can get the snow off of the hood, the top, and all of the lights, brake lights, headlights, all of the mirrors of the vehicle if it's been sitting out and got snowed on. That's extremely important. It's actually, there's a law that if you're driving down the road and you have snow that's still on the roof of it and it's blowing off, that's actually a traffic violation. So whisk broom's a nice thing to have. A blanket, again, in the event that you might get stuck in that bomb cyclone. Extra clothes. Candles and matches. There's actually a story of a person who had candles, matches, and a couple rolls of toilet paper. These days, it's like gold. And they survived using that. They kept warm with the toilet paper, the candle, and the matches. Bottled water is not a bad thing. You need the matches probably to melt the water once it freezes. Snacks, any medications, and a good first aid kit. Something. Nissan is really kind of an interesting car because they provide first aid kits with all of their cars. They come with them. Tires. We're going to talk a lot about tires. Sorry, but tires are the most important piece of safety equipment on your vehicle. The tire is what keeps you on the road. It's basically the only thing between your 4,000 or 5,000 pound vehicle and the roadway that keeps you on there. A lot of you kids and maybe some parents too are looking at this car and they're really excited. What I say to you is no, don't do that. It's fun, but don't do that. So there are a few different tire types that I want to talk to you about. We get a lot of questions about what the best options are for a vehicle, being in Colorado. Some of your more performance cars like Mustangs and stuff like that are going to come with a summer rated tire. Summer tires are good for warmer weather, most effective in temperatures above 45 degrees. Once it starts to get cooler than that, the tire compound actually starts to harden and it doesn't make as good of traction on the roadway. The tread also isn't designed for optimal traction in snow and ice. And again, you notice it says unsafe on snow and ice, and that's very true. When I was first with the police department, some of the older model Crown Victorias, which are a rear-wheel drive car, came from the factory with summer rated tires, and they were great. They made great traction in the summertime, but it rained, it snowed, whatever, and they were awful. I mean, that rear end was coming around on us. We couldn't stop. Just really not safe for an experienced driver, let alone a newer driver. So summer tires are good in the summer, not so much in the winter time. So our next option is winter tires. And you look at how the traction in the winter tire or the tread on the winter tire is a lot different. You notice all these little lines that are inside of the or cut into the traction lugs, and that's what these big chunks of rubber are called, or lugs. And what those do is they create a biting surface, kind of a sharp edge for the tire to go across the slick surface, snow or ice. What they also do is they allow snow to actually pack inside of those ridges and they're inside of those cuts. And that can actually create somewhat of a suction effect between the tire and ice in particular, and help keep you on the road. The difference between a summer tire and a winter tire on snow and ice is amazing. You know, it makes a huge difference. The problem with winter tires is the compound that they're made out of. It's designed for temperatures below 45 degrees. Once it starts to get warmer than 45 degrees, that compound actually starts to melt. Now, you don't physically see it drip or anything like that, but it gets substantially softer, and that will reduce tread life down to even a summer. I've seen people who bought winter tires, they drove them through the winter, kept them on over the summer, and they had to get new tires because the winter tires are almost bald. They just run out fairly quickly. You'll notice that there are little dots that are in the tread lugs as well, and that means that you can install studs. And basically what studs are little metal spikes that you can put into the tire, which help quite a bit with ice driving. I don't recommend putting those in. Number one, they're not very good for the road when it's dry outside, but it also makes driving when it's dry, which really is most of the time in Colorado, more difficult. Your car just won't handle as well, and it won't last as long. And also these type of winter tires reduces your stopping distance on dry road quite a bit. Again, kind of interesting, the difference between summer tires and winter tires when it's dry out. The summer tires are great when it comes to stopping. The winter tires aren't so much. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to have a set of summer tires for the summertime and switch out to winter tires in the wintertime. But that's not practical. I mean, you have to store a whole other set of tires in your garage and be diligent about swapping it out at the right time to make sure that you're getting the most bang for the buck, because it's a pretty substantial investment to have two sets of tires. Your next option is going to be an all-season tire. A lot of our all-wheel drive SUVs are going to be coming with some type of an all-season tire from the factory, and they're just kind of a good all-around tire. They're good dry, they're good wet, they're good in light snowy roads. They're not the best. The compound tends to be a little bit harder rubber, and that makes a difference with tread life. So they're going to last longer. I mean, you can see 50 and 60,000 miles on this type of a tire, which again, when you're spending upwards of $1,000, if not more, on new tires, you kind of want to have that. So they're a little more cost effective. When you're out buying tires, one of the I guess the gold standard for what to look for with the tire is going to be the three-peak mountain snowflake. If you look at the picture on the bottom, you see that snowflake with the mountains that's molded in. Canada actually requires this for the majority of their roads now. And there's a lot of tire manufacturers that are making tires up to this specification. And these are going to be the best ones to get for Colorado. I would strongly suggest looking for that. Problem is when you see that molded into a tire, it's going to be a bit more expensive. Get rid of. Hold on just 1 second. I apologize. Yeah, I did. I did have a section on here about all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive truck 4x4 type tires. Seems to have gone away. But those are a thing. You have what's called an all-terrain tire. And that's something if you have a larger pickup truck or a larger four-wheel drive vehicle. Those are kind of the suggested ones to get. And you also look for that snowflake tire to get the best ones. Other types of tire are going to be performance tires. So if you look at the tread pattern on this, it's kind of a nice looking tread pattern. It's aggressive, but it's more optimal for driving a little bit faster than you should. Maybe track days if you're into racing, stuff like that. Then there are straight out race tires. You see like drag racing tires are going to be completely flat. There's not going to be any tread on them. They're going to be what's called a slick. Or close to. There might be some small lines molded into them. Those are not suitable for roadway at all. And then mud tires, which again you'll see on your larger 4x4s. A lot of them are on Jeeps. They're kind of fashionable to put it on a Jeep. They're good if you take it off road and you actually use it for what it's built for. For where I live out in the middle of nowhere in Elbert County. And we have dirt roads, so whenever it rains, that road turns into mud. I need something like a mud tire out here in order to get out of my driveway sometimes. So that's kind of the options that I have. But mud tires really aren't optimal for roadway driving. They greatly reduce your stopping distance when it comes to applying the brakes. It's always kind of a fun thing to see the kids that bring their Jeeps out onto a driving pad and they they just can't stop as well as any of the other vehicles, and it's just their tires. That's the only reason. Tire maintenance is very important, something that we need to talk about. I can tell you several accidents that I responded to in the wintertime where the vehicle skid out of control, and it was fairly impressive how much they started to slide. Especially at the speeds that I figured that they were going, which were relatively low speeds. And then you get to the car and you look at it and there's absolutely no tread left on the tire. You can see even like the steel belting that's molded inside the rubber, which means that tire is long gone. And they're driving them around, and typically it's going to be a teenager that has that because the parents are going to be buying them a cheap car. They're not going to be paying attention to high dollar maintenance items like tires, so they're going to let them burn them out, or their kids and they're making bad choices and wearing those tires down a little bit quicker than they should be by doing burnouts and driving aggressively, and they just get to a point where they're unsafe on the road. I've had a couple of those in those instances. A couple of the kids say, well, I have four-wheel drive, I don't need to worry about it. It really doesn't make that big of a difference if you have four-wheel drive if you can't put the power down to the ground, and that's what your tires do. One important thing with tires is going to be checking the tire pressure, and you want to make sure that that's within spec of the vehicle that you drive. It's going to be specific to that make and model of vehicle, and where you're going to find those specifications will be either in the owner's manual or the driver's side door frame. You'll find a sticker, and you see the picture on the upper left here has one of those labels on there, and it tells you the front tire, rear tire, what the size should be that's recommended from the factory, and then what the maximum or the recommended tire pressure is going to be. So for this one, it's going to be 33 psi. The spare is going to be a little bit more. If you look over to the right, you'll see that kind of the difference in ground contact between the tire and the ground. based on the amount of inflation. So if the tire is underinflated, then the outside edges of that tire are going to be making contact with the roadway, but not the middle part. Properly inflated, you're going to see you're going to have good tread contact across the entire surface of the tire. Overinflated, it's only the center part that's making contact. Kind of a good way to determine your optimal tire pressure in the vehicle, or how well it's doing, is you can actually take chalk and mark a line across that tire tread and then drive it for a couple of feet on a empty parking lot, and then get out and look at that chalk. And the chalk lines will start to look like these tread lines down below, so you can tell if you're overinflated or underinflated. This should probably, the recommended time frame for checking your tire pressure is every 2 weeks. Very, very few people do that. But if there is a large shift in temperature, again, it's going from 70 to 30 to 50, that can actually cause your tires to lose pressure. So that's a good time to check if you're not into the 2-week routine. You also want to check your tire tread depth. Tires are actually built with a tread depth indicator molded into the tire. So you see on the upper right-hand corner, you want to find the treads. Going to be the blue lines there. Typically what I'll do is I'll take my finger and I'll stick in that tread and I'll run it down there until I feel that tread depth indicator. And when I feel it, if it's below the lugs on the tire, that tire's still got a little bit more life on it. If it's even with the tread on the lugs on the tire, then that means it's time to change them out. Another simple method that you can use is the penny method, where you take a penny and you stick Abraham Lincoln's head into the tread, and if his head is above the surface, that means it's time to get new tires. If his head's below the surface, then you're good to go for a little while longer. Here's a basic explanation of some of the new traction laws that have taken into effect over the past couple of years in Colorado. I kind of like the concept of this. Essentially, if the weather is bad enough in certain regions of Colorado, you can be cited for not having suitable tires. So if you look at like number 1, all-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive vehicles need to have 3/16 tread depth on the tire. That 3/16 is going to be the penny test. You need to make sure that you have tires with a mud or snow designation. So the M and S icon, it's going to be the same place where that snowflake is. If you have the snowflake, that should be included into this as well. And that is mountain snowflake icon. Everything's going to still require a minimum tread depth of 3/16 of an inch. And chains or an auto sock. I will tell you the thing about chains is I don't really like them. If you're required to put chains on your car, it probably means you should stay home. Chains are fairly difficult to deal with, especially for a newer driver. Putting them on it isn't terribly hard, but it can be if you don't pay attention to what you're doing. It can also be unsafe. Can also cause damage to your vehicle. And then if you're driving and you leave the chains on and the snow and ice melt, can cause damage to the road. Can also cause some damage to the vehicle. It's not going to work very well and be safe. So I recommend just staying home if you need chains. And there is a law in regards to putting chains on. You can see the red or the fines that are associated with those. So pay attention if you're going to take a long trip, especially going up like I-70 or going down south on I-25. Pay attention to what these laws are saying for the weather conditions, and to make sure you're in compliance with them. Here's some good reviews on tires. This YouTube one actually is, again, another one of those TFL reviews. They did a nice winter tire review that, again, it's pertinent to Colorado. They tested it on all Colorado roads. Tire Rack and Discount Tire are also places that you can purchase tires, but they have good references as far as doing your research on tires. I like to read reviews on different types of tires when I go out to buy them. Just to see how people are experiencing them, what they have to say about the tires. And then my certified service, this is actually a Chevrolet website, and they have a nice explanation of different types of tires. Let's stop. There we go. Okay, so that video is entertaining. It's kind of a fun introduction into our next section, but also the gentleman driving that, his name's Ken Block. He's an incredible driver. The way that he drives, even though it's on dry conditions, really simulates driving in winter conditions. He pushes the limit of traction of that vehicle in order to make it behave the way that it does. And every time you see him turn is basically a controlled skid. So what this shows you is it's very possible to control a vehicle and really almost artistically in a low traction situation. I know most of the kids are sitting here like, yeah, I'm going out to do that when it snows again. No, don't. He's a professional driver. He is better than really anyone that I'll ever meet in my lifetime, and his vehicle is definitely set up to do that. We also like the part where they go up to they're essentially big snow blowers that he's going around, and that's kind of setting up the point that when you're out on the road too and it's snowy and icy, there's going to be snow plows. Don't do that to the snow plows either. That's extremely dangerous, not only for you but for them. But folks like to pass those. I'm going to talk about it here in a bit, but one of my contributors is the manager of safety for CDOT, and he really wanted me to emphasize that aspect. So I'll talk about it here in a bit more too. So I really can't talk about driving techniques without telling you a little bit more about the programs that we offer. It's kind of a sales pitch, but not. You know, we're a nonprofit organization. We put together these classes to help keep people safe and to give them training that really everybody should. And typically that type of training is expensive. Well, we like to use grants and donations to bring those costs down so that they're available to anybody who can go through. If I had my way, they would be a state mandate that they go through this type of a class. And adults regularly recertify in this type of stuff because it's extremely important to understand. The type of classes that we offer are going to be more of an advanced type class, at least behind the wheel course. We talk about concepts like threshold braking, skid control, defensive driving, distracted and impaired driving, and then also the skid control. We also offer a driver awareness program, which again is the 4-hour class for new drivers to be able to get their permit at 15 and a half. They have to be 15 and a half to attend the class. One of the main instructors for this class, and the gentleman who put it together again, is that manager of safety for CDOT. He's a former firefighter. who went on to CDOT. He put together an incredible program that I think is one of the better offerings that you'll find in the state. As far as our teen crash avoidance skills class, that's the class that I helped set up back in 2005. The skills that we teach in that are based on what police officers learn as far as vehicle control, or first responders, because firefighters go through a very similar class. Our instructors, again, I'm going to say, are going to be the best that you will find. I don't say that because it's my program. I don't say that because they're my friend, but I say that because they are. They're current or former law enforcement or firefighter driving instructors. They're extremely dedicated to helping to keep the roadways safe and training drivers on how to be safe. Like me, they've responded to numerous fatal accidents and just felt helpless about what was happening and what they could do to make it better. Here's our promotion video. All right, so moving on to preparing for your trip when you go out. Another thing that the manager of safety for CDOT wanted me to include in this was this website, which is cotrip.org. It's kind of a neat website, especially if you're planning a longer trip. You can go on here and look at road conditions, closures. You can check routes for road conditions. You can check plow locations. Any travel alerts. This is a very good resource, and it's up to date. There's actually a section where you can access traffic cameras in different areas where the traffic cameras are available, so you can see what the roads look like. So if you're planning a long trip, I definitely suggest preparing yourself and looking at this website. We talk a lot about driving skills, and I think that's what a lot of people are here to learn is driving skills as far as winter driving. There's a lot more involved to driving than really the skills and the techniques to be a safe driver. Those are important, but the most important thing is your ability to pay attention and understand what type of information is coming from the road to you as you drive. And you're doing this very quickly. You're going down the road at maybe 60 miles per hour, which is very fast. So you need to be able to process information and understand what it means and how to properly respond to it. One of those things is understanding what's going on with the road, reading the road, and knowing what you need to do to respond safely in it. So if you look down at the bottom left-hand corner, this is a muddy road that's wet. This is probably going to be a little bit slick. You probably want to slow down. Next to that's going to be this snowy road. Obviously, you want to slow down in that type of situation. One of the common trends that I see with drivers lately, at least, is they don't want to slow down for that. I think that they feel as though they have all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive cars and they can conquer this without any sort of problem. Well, you might be able to be a little bit safer and go down that a little bit more efficiently. But when it comes to reacting to maybe a deer that runs out in front of you, or a kid, or another car, your brakes don't work any better no matter what sort of drivetrain you have. You have front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, all wheel drive, four wheel drive. Your car is going to have a hard time stopping in that no matter what it is. And that's really the biggest reason why you want to slow down, is so that if you need to make an emergency stop, you're going to be able to do so safely and make proper traction. Wet roads can be almost as bad as those snowy roads. And one condition that we didn't talk about, that I'll brush on really quick, is going to be hydroplaning. Your car can hydroplane in as little as an eighth of an inch of standing water. And what that is when your car is going across that surface of water, the tires actually float to the surface of water. You don't make any contact with the ground, and you don't have any traction. And there is no effective way to control that type of a skid. Next to that, to the left, is going to be this really pleasant looking winter road. Looks like a nice drive, trees that are coated in snow and frost, but you'll notice that the road's shiny. Now, I would say that probably 9 times out of 10, you can go down that road and not have any issues. But what that shininess tells me is there's a possibility that there could be black ice on that surface, especially when you start to get into the areas where it's more shadowed by the trees. So this, naturally, I'm still going to slow down on, even if it, might be bright and shiny outside. I don't know what that surface is going to be, and I don't want to be surprised by it, because if there's black ice, it's going to look exactly like that. And that's a concept that a lot of our Colorado drivers nowadays don't understand. You'll see people that just fly down a road like this, and when they hit that black ice, which could happen, I'm not saying it will, but it could happen. It's going to be very, very bad for them, and probably for somebody else if they hit them. So understand what you're looking up the road, and you need to adjust your driving accordingly. We talked about snow plows. Again, you need to respect these guys and stay behind them. They're clearing the roads to make the roads safe for you. You see a lot of folks that get impatient. They try to pass the snow plow, especially when they're lined up like this, and they go in between them. One thing you need to understand about a snow plow and the way that Colorado state law works is whenever that snow plow is in the course of its duty, which means the blade is down and they're plowing, they're not responsible for anything that they hit. So if you are trying to pass them and something happens and they hit you, it is your fault. They're not at fault for it. And it's something that you don't want to experience. You don't want to be hit by a snow plow. I've seen a couple of accidents like that, and they're nasty. They're bad. But they keep us safe. I'd rather stay behind the snow plow and drive on freshly plowed roads than something that has not been plowed. You want to make sure to clear your windshield. We talked about the ice scraper. We're reiterating that because it's important. It's one of those things that gets neglected more than it needs to. You need to be able to see. You need to be able to see everything that's in front of you. It wouldn't be a driving class if I didn't tell you that one of the first things you need to do when you get inside of a vehicle is put your seatbelt on. Seatbelt saves your life. I've seen accidents where people did not have their seatbelt on. And I've seen a similar type accident where they did. And the outcome is dramatically different. It's not an easy thing to see someone who's flown through a windshield because they didn't have the seatbelt on. Had another accident where a person didn't have their seatbelt on. They were kind of bent over at an odd angle doing something around their radio area and got into a crash. The airbag deployed and broke their neck and killed them. It's one of those things that just shouldn't have happened. If she had her seatbelt on, she would have survived. So the seatbelt does a couple things for us. Obviously it keeps you safe in the event of a crash. It also keeps you safe from the airbag. The airbag and the seatbelt really are designed to work together to save your life. If you don't have the seatbelt on and that airbag deploys, it deploys at around 200 miles per hour, so at a very rapid speed, and it can cause severe damage to your body if you don't have your seatbelt helping hold you in place. All right, so one of the techniques that we teach is called shuffle steering. This is one of the best ways to control your vehicle. It's nice and smooth. It forces you to have both hands on the steering wheel. Typically, we want you to hold the steering wheel at the 9 and 3. So you look at that picture, the steering wheel is kind of like an old clock. Parents probably recognize that. I'm sure very few kids anymore understand an analog clock, but that's what it looks like. So you have your 9 o'clock and your 3 o'clock position, and that's where you want to hold the steering wheel. Older driving schools would teach 10 and 2, so your hands are a little bit higher. And some car models actually have kind of a palm swell molded into the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 position, but that's really not the best place to hold the steering wheel. It's going to be the 9 and 3. You're going to have the best control with the least amount of arm fatigue over long periods of time holding the steering wheel there. We'll talk about threshold braking and ABS. So we mentioned a little bit before what ABS is with the anti-lock braking. And that's a good system. You apply the brakes. If the car feels like it's sliding with the braking, the ABS kicks in and helps keep you safe. But if you're a good driver and you're paying attention and you know what you're doing, you can actually do better than the ABS with the threshold brake, which is actually applying the brakes to the point just before the ABS would kick in or the wheels would lock up. You can see substantial increase in or decrease in your stopping distance from incorporating a threshold braking. It also works extremely well in snow and ice. You want to keep your eyes up and you want to look where you're going. My suggestion to any driver is you want to look about a quarter of a mile or 1,300 feet in front of you as you're driving. You think you're going down the road at 60 to 75 miles per hour highway speeds. You're getting close to about 100 feet per second that you're traveling. So you want to look about 13 seconds ahead. Most drivers, and this scares me, look about 35 to 50 feet in front of them when they're driving. At those speeds, when something happens in front of them, they just don't have the time to process and react to it safely, which is why we see a lot of interesting highway accidents. We'll look at a video of that here in a bit. I also want to scan the roadway. People get stuck in their natural field of vision where they're kind of looking forward, they're looking just down the road, but they're not looking at what's to the side, what's on the side of the road, what is on the other roads if you're at an intersection, and what's to the left and to the right. So you want to get into kind of a routine where you're looking ahead, you scan left, you scan right, you check your mirror, look ahead, scan left, scan right, look ahead, look at your mirror, look ahead. Something like that. That's not only a good safe practice, but if you're driving at night or you drive a lot, it helps kind of break some of the monotony and keep you awake. You want to increase your following distance in the wintertime. Following distance is typically going to be about 3 seconds or 3 car lengths. That seems to, again, be a forgotten concept with drivers in our state right now. You'll have people, you look in the mirror and they'll be so close to you that you can't even see the hood of their car. You just kind of see them sitting there behind your car. And people get comfortable doing that, but the thing is, if I were to slam on my brakes because there's an emergency in front of me, again, a deer or a dog or a kid runs out in front of me and I hit the brakes, they have no chance of stopping and they're going to hit me and they're going to make the situation very, very bad for everybody. Stopping distance following distance allows you to do that. So that 3 seconds or 3 car lengths is a good rule to follow. You want to double and even triple that when it's snowing outside. And the thing, again, we reiterate it, and we're going to try to say it as much as possible, but slow down. That truly is the best way to stay safe when it's snowing and icy outside, is just slow down. There is such a thing as too fast for conditions. If you're in an accident and you're going under the speed limit and you slide into another car because you lose control of your car, you can get cited for going too fast for conditions. And there isn't a set rule for what that is, what too fast for condition is. It's more of a judgment. It's basically driving the car beyond its points of control. So as a good driver, you need to understand where that is, and you need to be able to read the roads and understand your vehicle enough to be able to make that assessment properly. This is going to be shuffle steering.
Slalom course using the shuffle steer technique. Shuffle steering is a safer way to control your vehicle as it allows you to keep both hands on the steering wheel while making turns. Unlike the more common methods of palming or hand over hand, which can cause your hand to slip off the wheel, lose your grip, and increase your risk of losing control of the vehicle. To shuffle steer correctly, both hands should always be on the steering wheel, slide and alternate meeting at the 12 and 6 position, and should never cross over. Like all courses throughout the day, you will begin at a set of green cones. When the instructor tells you to begin, choose either the left or right side of the slalom course. Maneuver the course at a slow but steady pace and make alternating left and right shuffle steer turns, avoiding the cones. Avoid jabbing the throttle, as this will cause your vehicle to push wide and make it difficult to stay on the course. To predict where to position your vehicle, try to keep your focus about 1 to 2 cones ahead. Complete the course by exiting through the pair of green cones. A helpful tip when learning to shuffle steer is to call out 12 and 6 cadence, like 12-6, 12-6, to help remind where your hands should meet while turning the wheel. It's also a good idea to practice shuffle steering while waiting in line for other students to complete the course. Although your front tires turn, your vehicle actually pivots on its rear wheels. So while driving the slalom course, shuffle steer and turn only when the cone passes your side view mirrors. Here's what the maneuver looks like on the actual course. Since you won't be able to see the cone when you are preparing to turn, you'll have to predict where it is. But prediction is the foundation of good defensive driving. Also, keep the cones close to your vehicle, as it will reduce the amount of steering effort needed and place your vehicle in a good position to shuffle steer around the next cone. This next animation demonstrates what happens when you turn the vehicle too early. Turning early will cause you to hit obstacles, while turning too late will cause you to turn too wide and miss the next cone altogether. Don't worry if you make a mistake though, your instructors are here to help you and get it right on your next run through. In summary, to become a safer and more efficient driver, follow these tips for success while avoiding these behaviors while performing the slalom course using the shuffle steer technique.
So this video is one that we put together for our driving pad. It goes over what shuffle steering is, and it's one of those concepts that's fairly difficult to learn because it makes you use both hands equally. What a lot of drivers will do when they're steering is they'll have both hands on the wheel, but they're crossing over, so one hand's lifting up and going over the top of the other one, and that's actually not a natural body movement. It's not smooth. And one of the most important concepts for driving, especially in snowy and icy conditions, is to make your motions nice and smooth, to avoid any sort of turbulence from the car's weight transfer as it's turning, because that translates down to the tires and can disrupt your traction a little bit. On this course, we can actually, from the outside of the vehicle, I can watch a car going through it, and I can tell when someone is not shuffle steering because of the way that the car moves. The body actually bounces slightly as it's making its turn, and that's less efficient, and it's not a smooth motion like what you need.
Slalom course using the shuffle steer technique.
Apologize. The cursor has to be in the right spot for me to advance the slide. This is going to be threshold braking.
Threshold braking exercise. Being able to control your vehicle during an emergency situation is a critical part of safe and effective driving, especially in our unpredictable driving environment. When you step on the brake pedal, hydraulic fluid is fed through brake lines to the wheel's brake calipers, clamping down on discs to slow and stop your vehicle using friction. To help the driver avoid locking up wheels and losing steering control during emergency braking, safety systems like anti-lock braking or ABS have been installed in modern vehicles. Anti-lock brake systems automatically pump the brakes during hard braking, but as this chart shows in the red areas, there are moments when the car's brakes are not activated. Threshold braking, when performed properly, creates consistent friction throughout the entire braking maneuver, causing the vehicle to actually stop in less distance than when using anti-lock brakes. The threshold braking exercise will require you to come to a complete stop within a 50-foot long box of cones. After stopping, you will exit the course through the opening provided. You will be using a 3-9 hand position on the steering wheel during this exercise. To properly threshold brake, you will want to practice pressing your brake pedal quickly but methodically, like trying to squeeze water from a wet sponge. Avoid stabbing the brake pedal, as this will engage your ABS system. Beginning at the green cones and upon your instructor's direction, you will accelerate to at least 40 miles per hour towards the braking box. Do not engage your brakes until the front of your car reaches the first green cones, as shown here. The goal is to brake smoothly and get as close as you can to the end of the cones without hitting them. Avoid the temptation to brake too soon or drive too slowly. Otherwise, you will not gain any benefit from this exercise. Remember, the challenge is to stop your vehicle within 50 feet. Also, though we recommend 40 miles per hour, your vehicle's actual speed may vary through this course. In summary, to become a safer and more efficient driver, follow these tips for success while avoiding these behaviors while performing the threshold braking exercise.
Okay. So a good way to practice both of those, you can go out into a empty parking lot. You can even use like empty 2-liter bottles or milk containers to make your cone patterns, to make the slalom, or to make a box that you want to stop in. You just want to make sure that it's an empty parking lot. If you know the folks that own it or the company that owns it, ask permission first. Is usually a good practice. However, school parking lots do work, and you know, if a police officer or if a security officer comes up and asks you what you're doing, you can tell them, and usually they'll be like, okay, you know, that's good, as long as you're not doing something like crazy, like you're trying to do the Ken Block drifting around light poles and stuff like that. Then you can look at a reckless driving charge. But if you're doing honest practicing, like what we just demonstrated, generally you can get away with it. It's also good to practice those concepts in parking lots when it's snowy outside. You really want to get a sense for braking in the snow, as far as how the ABS feels and how the car behaves. And in a parking lot is a good place to do that. As long as you're being safe and you're not doing anything stupid, you won't get questioned much about it. And then you can practice the threshold braking technique. And that video of the sponge, that's actually a true thing. I went to a class, an advanced class, a number of years ago, and they actually made us take our shoes and socks off, took those big sponges that were full of water and had us practice squeezing the water out of the sponges and then sucking the water back into the sponge. And it really is a good representation of the motion that should be applied to the brake pedal. That talks a little bit about your reaction time. So your average reaction time for most drivers is going to be about 1.6 seconds. And again, if you're going highway speeds, we talked, you're going close to 100 feet per second. So you've gone almost 150 feet before you decide how you're going to react to an obstacle that's in front of you. That's how long it takes for your brain to process what's going on. And then another 1.5 seconds or so in your response. So if your response is to apply the brakes, it takes you another 1.5 seconds to stop. So at 55 miles per hour, there is demonstrated in this animation, takes 70 yards or 200 feet from the time of perception of the emergency to the time that you actually come to a stop. What you want to do in snow and ice is you want to anticipate that that's going to double or even triple. And that's why that following distance is extremely important. Where you would normally follow a car at 3 car lengths, 3 or 4 car lengths, you want to double or triple that to 6 or 9 car lengths even. And it makes other drivers on the road really upset because they get impatient, but you're going to be the one that gets home. They may not. Just one of those things you got to think about there. This was covered in the video too, but it's just another picture of that animation of how anti-lock brakes works, where it's where you have kind of the peaks and valleys of the ABS engagement, and there are those points where the brakes aren't even applied. Or a threshold brake, it's nice and smooth, and the brakes are always applied. There's always 100% control over that system of the car. I did tests with threshold braking versus ABS at 35 miles per hour with a Dodge Durango. On average, I found that I actually stopped about 15 feet sooner using threshold braking than I did using the ABS at only 35 miles per hour. I think is a fairly substantial increase, and it works much better when it's snowy out. For those of you who are somewhat experienced drivers, if you go into an intersection, there's a stop sign, you stop at the stop sign, or you try to, and you just keep sliding through, and you feel the ABS hammering away. If you go into a threshold brake where you back off on the brake a little bit, the best way to do that really is just to curl your toes. It relieves enough pressure on that braking system to go into the threshold brake. You'll stop. I mean, it's almost pronounced. It's very pronounced how easily you stop from that, because you feel the car jerk and you'll stop. Dead slide. Here's a couple of types of skids that you may experience on the road. So this just kind of shows you what that understeer skid looks like. So understeer again is when your front tires stop making traction. You're trying to turn, but the car just wants to continue straight. Most important thing with any type of skid is to remain calm. That's one of the bigger causes of accidents that I've seen, is people panicking and doing the wrong thing and making the situation much worse. You want to take your foot off the accelerator. You don't want to apply the brake. And one of the more important concepts with this is you want to look where you're going. So the tendency for a driver is going to be to look off the side of the road because that's where the car is heading. But you want to go around the curve. So your body is naturally going to force the car to go where you're looking. So if you're looking at the tree that's off the side of the road that you're about to hit, you're probably going to hit it. But if you look around the curve, you're more likely to make it around the curve and be safe. With an understeer, you want to make sure to straighten the wheels. So as you're going around this, the car's not turning, but your wheels are turned. Understand that they're not making any traction as they're turned. They make more traction if they're pointed straight. So very quickly, you're going to straighten the steering wheel and then go back into the turn. And you'll actually feel the car make traction and it'll continue going around this curve. It's a very simple concept. It's very hard to master because it is a very quick movement to straighten those tires and then go back into the turn. And here's an oversteer situation. Now, again, remain calm with an oversteer. You notice the rear end is coming around on you. This is going to depend on the type of car that you have, the way that you want to get out of this type of a skid. So if you have a rear wheel drive car, you want to take your foot off the accelerator because the reason that you're doing this is because you're putting too much power to those rear wheels. You want to reduce that by taking your foot off the accelerator. If you're in a front wheel drive or an all wheel drive car, you actually want to, this is happening more than likely because your foot is on the brake. You want to take your foot off of the brake. And then you want to give the car a little bit of gas. You don't want to jump on the gas pedal and go too fast, but you just want to squeeze that gas pedal a little bit to give more acceleration because your rear end right now is going faster than your front end. So you want to speed that front end a little bit up to straighten the car out. That one's kind of a hard concept to get. The rear wheel drive car in a oversteer like this is much easier. It's just very simple, where this is, it's, you want to give the car a little bit of gas, which is counterintuitive. And then again, you want to look where you want to go. You don't want to look off to the side of the road. You want to look over at the curb or beyond the curb. You want to make sure that your corrections with the steering wheel are smooth, and it'll help straighten out the vehicle. This is a new program that we're rolling out. This incorporates a skid car. There's only 5 of these in the country that are available to the public. Typically, this type of a class is going to cost around $400 per student. Through grants, we were actually able to make this available at about $150. Bearing in mind that this equipment is very expensive, which is why the cost of these classes are pricey.
Welcome back to Colorado's Best. You know, we've had some really nasty weather lately. We're still in the winter months, and when it's bad weather, don't you teach people to drive safely in bad weather?
Yes, I've been working as an EMT for 12 years, and there's not enough training to do defensive driving. And basically what I did, I've seen mostly everything on accidents. I've seen people die from young kids to older people. And with doing it, I wanted to expand my teaching, my saving lives to people by teaching them how to do defensive driving.
So I understand, not only do you teach police officers, other ambulance drivers, sheriff's deputies, now you can teach the general public.
Yes. Get yourself familiarized with a course, and then gently speed up the speed of a vehicle, and that way I'm gonna be able to put you on a skid and get you comfortable with that skid. So the way we teach people to be comfortable behind your wheel, to feel out which skid they're going into. Front wheel skid, understeer. So when the front wheels are skidding, and then we have rear wheel skid when the behind or the rear wheels go out of control. I am not going to tell you how to turn the steering wheel, because by the way where you're looking, you're going to be able to control the vehicle and point the vehicle in that direction.
So you look where you want to go. You don't think about turning where you want to go. You look where you want to go, and your body will follow suit. So look where you want to go.
Where you want to go. So like, so you were looking over here. So you're looking in the middle cone, and we're going to be approaching that cone. You're going to look at the exit cone. And then you're gonna look in the middle at the big cones, and look at the middle cones. And you're looking at the middle cones. You're gonna be looking at the new exit point. You're looking in the middle. You're looking at the exit.
Wow. Would I have crashed?
So we're running out of time, so I'm going to get you all through this a little bit quicker. But that program is. It gives drivers experience that most drivers won't be able to have unless they're out in a real life situation. Truly the best way to learn how to drive in the wintertime is through experience. And you want that experience to be in a closed course that's controlled. And that skid car offers that opportunity for any driver to experience skid and learn how to get out of a skid, really in any condition. So we can actually teach winter driving in the summertime now with that platform, where most winter driving classes are held usually in Colorado in February and last for the month and are extremely expensive, where you're talking, $800 to $1,200 for some of the better ones up in Steamboat. Where this one, we can teach you the same stuff in about half of a day and get you a lot of good experience. I anticipate that class to be available in 2021, the beginning part. So for more information, or if you have any questions, there's my email address. There's the phone number that you can reach us at, and then also our website if you have any interest. And again, I'm always happy to answer questions or talk or do whatever you need. So feel free to reach out. That will be the end of our program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Theo. Really appreciate having you. And thank you everyone else for attending. A recording of this webinar and Theo's presentation will be emailed to you sometime tomorrow. And we'll also post the material on our website at dcsdk12.org/parent-university. And thank you again for joining us. And I really hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you again soon.